welcome.
Oh, hi. Hello. Uh, you know, I just had to cut a telephone conversation short. I have a couple of friends in London, Ontario. They just came back from New Brunswick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I was asking them if they stayed around to look at the tide coming in and Bay of Fundy.
Well, that's kind of an overrated thing.
Yeah, I see it. It's spectacular.
Okay.
Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yeah.
Anyone who can hear me?
Oh, there's
Yes.
Jerry.
Hi, Karen.
Jerry. Hi.
Hi.
Okay. All set and raring to go.
Yeah, Gersha's just setting up the recording.
Okay, great.
By the way, Frank, Karen, the star of the show today, she is a Trini living in British Columbia.
Oh, what part of British Columbia?
I'm in the Okanagan Valley.
Oh, I used to live in Trail, British Columbia.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's even more.
Yeah, about
dug in there.
about 100 years ago.
Okay. So what were you doing in Trail?
At that time, I was a high school teacher in Trail.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So where are you right now?
In Ontario.
Okay.
Windsor, Ontario.
Okay.
Right near Detroit, the Detroit
Yeah.
border.
Yeah.
Well, the only place in Canada that I've been in British Columbia was Victoria. I spent a day in Victoria.
Beautiful there.
Yes,
Did
it's
you-
beautiful. It's England, really.
Yeah. Did you go to Bouchard Gardens?
I love Victoria. When I was in the United States Air Force, they very graciously sent me clear up to Goose Bay, Labrador,
Oh,
Arctic base there, which I really liked a lot, actually.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I've been to Goose Bay.
Have you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
my husband's a geologist, and his first, when he was doing his thesis, his work was actually in Labrador.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Hmm.
Well, one of my fond memories up there was going over to the Canadian base, which had a big swimming pool, indoor swimming pool, and being in the lovely warm swimming pool water and looking out the window at 12-foot long icicles outside. I always remember that. Oh,
Okay, so I guess we'll get started. Gersha's got the recording all set up. Gersha, will you introduce us and then we'll take it from there?
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Poetry and Prose. It's the 18th of August, 2024, and this is our Author of the Month meeting. Today we're featuring Karen Barrow, and Heather is our lovely chairperson for today. Heather, I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Poetry and Prose welcomes Karen Barrow as our Author of the Month for August 2024. Karen grew up in North Central Trinidad in the 1960s, and she always had a dream of becoming a writer. As she herself says, I always had my head in a book and a pen in my hand. She attended St. Augustine Girls High School, where the indomitable principal, Anna Mahese's own personal choice in a university influenced Karen's decision to attend Mount Allison University in small town Sackville, New Brunswick in Canada upon her graduation. That's behind God's back, I know, I was there too. This life-changing decision was to color Karen's life and lead her to realizing her childhood dream of becoming a writer. At Mount Allison University, Karen met her future husband, a fellow student majoring in geology.
To the surrounding forest.
Could we, Jerry, could you mute,
Sorry.
please?
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Okay. At Mount Allison, Karen met her future husband, a fellow student majoring in geology. And his eventual peripatetic career took him to various locations across Canada and throughout the world, actually. So Karen was able to gather skills and experience needed to pour into a writing life. While bringing up her children and conducting her own busy career as an audiologist, she honed her writing skills, eventually producing 3 books. Palmyra is her latest book and the first one to be published. In this exciting Gothic historical fiction thriller, Palmyra is set in the tropical plantation in her home island of Trinidad and Tobago. Beautifully written with every attention given to historical and geographical detail and setting, the theme of mystery and suspense draws the reader into a world of family secrets and intrigue. Now we will turn to Karen, engaging her in a few questions designed to shed further light on her motives and inspiration in bringing this wonderful work to light. Where and how was the idea born in creating a basis for the theme and plot of Palmyra, Karen? And what was your inspiration?
It has, I think the first spark is there was an award-winning book, a Canadian award-winning book, and it's a historical fiction. It's about a young slave boy. It starts off in Barbados, and it's his wild and wonderful life that he has. He has lots of adventures, and it starts off in Barbados, as I said. And as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, I don't feel transported. Like I don't feel like I'm in Barbados. And for me, place is very important. For me, my travels is what inspires all of my writing. And almost in picking a book, it's not plots, it's not character for me, it's place that comes first. And I guess like I had written 2 other novels prior and some other writing, and I guess I'd reached a stage where in my head this thought popped into my head is that I think I can do a better job than this, or whether I have or not. But so I was finally ready to write what I know, because my other 2 books weren't set in Trinidad. So that was the first inspiration. After that, it was, I guess I figured I'd be writing it in Trinidad. And this whole idea of setting it on a plantation just kind of stuck with me. Again, write what you know. Sugar, I didn't know anything about sugar. I think I'd been on a school outing once to a sugar factory, but I'd had a passing acquaintance with cocoa plantation, so that was the choice. So then it was, well, we're in Trinidad, and quickly again, write what you know. So it was either going to be Santa Cruz or Maracas Valley. I think around that time when I'm fishing around for where I stumbled across a YouTube video that highlighted the Ortonola estate. And as soon as that, it's about a 5-minute video, and it's all about how the house was, the estate was bought by a well-known Valsain family, and they decided to renovate the house. And as soon as I saw the picture of this renovated house in the grounds, I was like, that's it. That's where my book is going to be. So that was where the setting, I think around the same time when all this is starting to percolate in my head, I listened to actually as an audio book of a Sherlock Holmes collection, and one of the stories was Hound of the Baskervilles. And there's the central plot theme, the central twist in that story. When I read it, I thought, ooh, that's cool. So I decided to sort of incorporate that into my storyline. And I think finally, the whole story is fiction. It's total, in my craziness that went off in my head. Like I said, I excuse all the bacchanalia and everything that goes on in the book. I blame it on COVID, because I started writing it in the first months of lockdown of COVID, the COVID pandemic. And I think it was just a way to release some of that emotion and everything that was going through. But I also just happened to was put in touch with Vin Cannell, and I think it was a brother of his that had owned Ortonola for decades, but they hadn't used it and had fallen into disrepair and disuse, not disuse. But he just has a mind like a steel trap, and he was able to tell me all this family history and family stories. So some of the history of my characters are borrowed from the Cannell family, like not in like, I haven't stuck to factual, but just little sometimes family names or an incident or something that happened in the family is kind of peppered throughout Palmyra. But for the most part, it's just purely fiction. It's just my crazy imagination.
Like, we do draw from all our influences, you talked about, when you were a young person, you read Victoria Holt, and she's really big on setting. and she's one of my favorites as well, because at Bishop's, in literature, we read some of her stories. So she's one of my favorites as well. Now, tell us about your writing process. Given your busy career and your family life, I realize your children are probably grown now, but do you do rewrites until you get it to the point at which you want it, or are you like Voltaire? You can just write and that's it.
No, definitely. One thing I've learned through the process, like I said, this is my third novel, is I think initially you'd write something and go back and rewrite it to make sure it was good as it can be before you moved on. And I think it was finally reading Stephen King's book where one of his pieces of advice was just get it on paper, like just throw it out there, vomit it out on the paper. It doesn't matter how refined it is. It's just to get your ideas on paper. So I learned to kind of try not to go back, because I realized too that half of what you've written is just going to get thrown out anyway. So it doesn't make sense to perfect it. That being said, there are people who can do that, as you say, Voltaire, and I met a well-known international best-selling author, and she claimed that she did it in front of us. It was the coolest thing I've seen. She's just in her head and she's typing away in her mind, and how her process was, she perfected as she went. And I just didn't understand how you could plot so that when you reach the end, you had perfectly set up everything. But kudos, there are people who could do it. But for me, I do need a few drafts, and then I will hand it out to some beta readers, get feedback from them, and especially if I'm looking for specific things, and then I'll go back and do several drafts, and then get it out to my editor after that.
So did you work with a publisher, or?
I worked with an editor, and then the publisher is Prose Press. They're an independent publisher, so they offer all the ranges that you can get with a traditional publisher. You just have a little more control over your work.
Now, I understand you've conducted a book launch in Canada and recently in Trinidad. You were here earlier this year. And of course, your book is on Amazon. Do you have other plans in marketing your book, or even getting it into local libraries or even libraries in Trinidad? Have you looked into any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm learning to just take whatever opportunities come my way. So like, for instance, today, so Jerry was very generous in hooking me up with you guys. So I realize it's every little thing counts. Every bit of exposure helps for people to get to know you, get to know your book. In terms of, I've been asking libraries. It's a little harder when you're not with the big traditional publishers. It's a little bit harder. So you basically have to get people to ask to have your book come in, and some choose whether some will choose, like I got it into local libraries, they will support local authors. But it's kind of piecemeal, and the same with bookstores. You're piecemealing it, trying to get it. It's almost like you have to go to each bookstore, which is impossible. So I mean, Amazon has certainly made things a lot easier for non-traditional publishers.
Right. Well, independent bookstores are more likely to accept you on a contractual basis. And I did mention to you about Tidewater in Sackville. And also, don't forget when you visit later this year to check out the Mount Allison Library, because they will be happy to have your work as well.
Yeah, I've already sent out an email to them, so thanks for that tip.
You did better than me. I haven't gotten there yet, although they have previous work of mine. Anyway, so my last question to you is, you plan any future works and coming up, or have any plot lines in your head that you're thinking of working on?
I think what I'm going to do is, having been through this process with Palmyra, I'm going to look at my other work, and I'm going to polish those up and brush those up and get them out there as well. So that will be what I'll be working on.
Right. Well, once you're a writer, you're always have to have something on the go.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, because we have a chock full of readers today, so we'll move on to the readers who will introduce us to Karen's work. And the first one up is Frank. You unmute, Frank.
So
There
this
we go.
this is excerpt number 1, and it's fairly short. So here goes. Palmyra, Trinidad, 1978. I used to think the past was dead and gone. That passage of time erased memories. But as a stranger approached my house, their features distorted by the shimmering heat rising from the winding tarmac, a door long shut in my mind creaked open. It was the merest crack that I pondered why a lone white female, cropped hair and bell-bottom pants notwithstanding, would be coming up to my driveway. Then something about the stride and how a raised arm wiped the sweat off the forehead gave me pause, and the hairs on the back of my neck rose. I hoped it was my failing eyesight playing tricks. But when the stranger stopped and turned, hands on their hips, to survey the property, the door to my memories opened wider. I saw images of a time long past when another stranger once stood in the same place in much the same way. His gaze also swept the jungle-clad hills that encircled the valley, then drifted over the cocoa trees, coming to rest on the salmon tree, the canopy of which, even then, dominated the front garden. And just as his attention finally shifted to the great house, so did this stranger's, their gaze turned upward to where the fronds of 3 Moorish palms, which once tickled the lawn, swayed lazily in the mid-morning breeze, more than 100 feet in the air. I winced as the stranger's gaze raked the old estate house, well aware of the epithet. The great house was a misnomer these days, a faded watermark of the house Mr. Robbie first laid eyes on more than 80 years ago. On that day, the great house was less than 10 years old, a sprawling single-story house that replaced a more modest structure that had squatted on the property for decades. Back then, Europe's insatiable demand for chocolate had reversed the fortunes of sugar barons in favor of cocoa planters. The house's galvanized roof was a vibrant red, trimmed with fancy fretwork. The slatted jalousies glistened with fresh green paint, and the wooden railing along the length of the open veranda gleamed bright white. I'd stood mere yards from where Mr. Robbie stopped to peruse the house, the air heavy with the tang of the grapefruit I'd picked. Surprise softened to appreciation as he stared at the house, perched on a series of concrete pillars, the veranda shaded by baskets of hanging ferns that twirled in the breeze. Then his lips tightened as another emotion darkened his gaze, one harder for a naive 11-year-old boy to comprehend. Standing on the now enclosed veranda, I was grateful I wasn't close enough to see the stranger's reaction to the railings ribboned with peeling paint, the patchwork of rusty galvanized that served as a roof, or the fancy fretwork broken and missing in places. The profusion of tree ferns, palms, and hibiscus that once enclosed the great house, offering spaces for a precocious boy to hide, are long gone. The pillars on which the house rested are exposed now, as is the crawl space between the timbered flooring and dusty ground. a wasteland of discarded cans, lumber, and broken implements, with neither chick nor child to accommodate and needing nothing more than a secure roof and a comfortable bed. I chose to ignore the house and focus my retirement years on running what is essentially a hobby estate. And this is excerpt number 2. Joe, where are you? Your mother is looking for you. You're supposed to be at your studies. Knee deep in cold water, our hands hovering over the surface of the flowing river, my friend Kermit and I ignored the distant summons of the estate manager. My gaze is fixated on the crayfish ambling along the riverbed as I tense in anticipation of the speed I'll need to grab the crustacean. There you are. Didn't you hear me calling you, or what? I slip on the mossy rocks and with a splash, land chest first into the water. I rise, soaked to the bone. Kermit laughing to kill himself and my prey nowhere in sight. Oh gosh, Mr. Tom, it get away. Never mind about that. Your mother's been hollering for you these past 20 minutes. Now you go and soak yourself. You know you're not too old to get your backside tan. I glare at Kermit as he belts out another peal of laughter. You're staying or what? He shakes his head. Nah, I late as it is for weeding the garden patch. Wouldn't want my ma sending out a posse after me. I run back to the great house, my bare feet, my stomach churning with resentment that while the other boys are already working on the estate, I am stuck at school, trapped by ma's dreams that I can do better and settle for a life of a laborer. I slip into the room I share with ma in the servants' quarters and hurriedly change into a dry pair of shorts and a shirt. After a dash to the clothesline where I hang my soaking clothes, I follow the aroma of stewing beef to the kitchen. Seeing Olive with her back to the stove as her dark, fleshy hands work a ball of dough on the kitchen table, I quietly lift the lid from the pot and take a whiff of fragrant curling steam. Oxtail soup, my favorite. Ouch! The lid drops with a clang, my knuckles smarting from Olive's wooden spoon. What business your does have with my pot, young man? If you know what's good for you, you better go and find your mother. She's been looking for you for the past hour. I find Ma in the laundry room, sorting the master's shirts and the mistress's dresses, which the laundress pressed earlier that afternoon. Her white cotton apron and floral skirts are as crisp now as they were this morning. She looks up sharply from her task. Where have you been? Gallivanting around as usual, I suppose, instead of attending your studies? How do you expect to better yourself if you don't get that college exhibition? I open my mouth to deliver a smart aleck reply, fed up with the continual reminders of what will happen if I don't win a scholarship to one of only 2 boys' high schools in the capital city, Port of Spain. And none of your back chat, you hear me? She places her slender hands, the color of milk cocoa, on her slim hips. Did you pick the grapefruit for the master's breakfast like I asked? I lower my eyes. Go do it right now and make sure you don't leave any lying on the ground as soon as you're done. And as soon as you're done, come back here and open your books. That's the second excerpt.
Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you so much. Any comments?
Yeah, that description was so clear. I could really picture the house. Yeah,
Yes.
lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that too. Yeah. And actually, it reminded me, as you say, of the Santa Cruz Valley.
It's interesting going through the Santa Cruz Valley even today. You know, it's the immortelles trees that used to cover all the cocoa plantations that are now pretty much in disrepair. It's very, very sad that they just let them go.
Mhm.
Both my grandparents dealt with cocoa as well, and but once the world the price dropped when the Africans started to grow cocoa, and the price dropped in Trinidad. Well, it all went to waste in a way. But Karen has captured that era of history quite well.
But you know
It's
what? You know what was the purpose of the immortal trees? It was to shade the cocoa. The only problem is that in hurricanes and so on, the trees would come crashing down and destroy the crops. So what they decided to do was to plant bananas as well, banana trees, which would give the shade, and also you get some bananas as well.
Yeah.
the other thing too that I learned in my research is that I wouldn't say there's a resurgence, but there are the cocoa production. It is still there in Trinidad, maybe not as much. I don't know if it's more in Central and South. And there is local chocolate, very, very good local chocolate being made in Trinidad. But apparently, the quality of the cocoa from Trinidad is one of the highest in the world. And
That's
the little
right.
bit that we get that's made is actually reserved for just high quality chocolates. So actually the price is very high for Trinidad cocoa. So it's unfortunate, but I guess we've moved away from an agrarian cultures, and but it seems to me that there could be a demand once again for something that has.
Pete, you're right. I saw a television show about cocoa in general worldwide, but they featured Trinidad as
Mhm.
having the highest quality.
And you still
So
can get good quality Trinidad cocoa bars here. You've seen them made here in stores right here, which is really nice. Two things before I forget regarding Amazon. I don't know if you know this, but they kind of sublet the books, which of course are printed on demand. And I have discovered that many of my books, because of Amazon, are on Barnes and Noble in the United States, booksellers, and in Waterstones in England, all because they're on Amazon.
Mm.
And Amazon, I'm sure you know, has a library cost also for library, which is a little less than what you would pay for the regular retail cost.
What's
And
that?
yes, you'll see on your Amazon site, they'll have a library and booksellers rate that libraries and booksellers can buy.
I see. Gotcha.
Yeah. Now, whether they do or not, I don't know, but it's there for them to do it. Yeah.
well, now our next reader is Mr. Krishna Samaru. Hi, Krish.
Ready? Go ahead.
All set. Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kusha, for putting me early on the program for a change. That's nice. Congratulations, Karen, on your book, Palmyra. And this is an excerpt involving the narrator, who is called Young Joe, and Mr. Robbie, the overseer. So here goes. I leap up from the clump of tamari, whose sensitive leaves have idly been stroking shut with a swipe of my finger. Standing at attention, an excuse ready for why I was not where I was supposed to be, I sat with relief when I realized it's Mr. Robbie and not the master. After a few words in Patois to Paco, the self-appointed foreman of the Venezuelan cocoa laborers, or cocoa pioneers, he walks towards me, that is Mr. Robbie, walks towards me, cutlass in hand, as Paco leads his group of men toward a cocoa grove. Mr. Robbie passes a forearm across his glistening forehead, pushing back his wide-brimmed hat. Didn't think it would get this hot up here in the hills. It's cooler in the rainy season, I respond, especially around Christmas. Wouldn't mind some of that cooler weather right now. He slides his cutlass into the leather sheath hanging from his belt, then wipes his clean-shaven face with a sweat-stained handkerchief. Been wondering where you got to. Haven't seen you since that business with the praying mantis. A smile hovers on his lips. I shrug. What with school and extra studying for the college exhibition exams, I've spent little time on the estate since Mr. Robbie's probationary appointment as overseer. I just came from the fermenting sheds, I reply. Had to tell Mr. Tom he was wanted up at the house. I scuff at an anthill with my bare foot, covering the hole with dark, loomy soil as I do so. His mood's not been the best since the master ordered that a new fermenting shed be built only 2 weeks before harvest. Hope he didn't bite your head off. He winks. That's why I organized a team to do some tree pruning. Thought it best to create some distance. He stiffens. That one of the nieces? I follow his gaze past a grazing donkey to where a woman leads a horse. Her height and purposeful stride making her easy to identify. Miss Isabel, I reply as she disappears into the stables. Oh, that the one always pushing her nose into estate business? I scowl. She's just making herself useful. Even the master says so. Mr. Robbie's eyebrows rise. Then he throws back his head and laughs. Looks like the young mistress has a defender. I lower my head, heat pulsing in my cheeks. I shrug off the hand that comes to rest on my shoulder. Only teasing young Joe. I'm sure she has many admirable qualities. She is the best of the lot of them, I retort, parroting Ma's words. Is she indeed? Mr. Robbie gazes at the great house, an edge to his voice. He glances back at me, his eyes shadowed. What happened to their parents? I hesitate. It's okay if you'd rather not say, just that the men talk. And I'm not sure if all the stories one hears are true. I shrug. I never knew their father. He was the master's younger brother, Mr. Pierre. He died the same year I was born. Their mother died a few years later from a snake bite. I look down at my dusty feet, recalling that one look from Madame's stern, dark features would send me scurrying from the house to hide in the shrubbery. I still remember the sting of her hand on my face when she caught me eating one of her precious Julie mangoes, the tastiest, juiciest mango in the world, reserved exclusively for the family's use and only passed on to us if the fruit is bruised or overripe, as I learned all too well that day. But I know better than to speak ill of the dead. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Krishna. Very well read.
Thanks.
Any comments?
That's very nice.
A really wonderful scene. Really, I mean, really, the tension and the it sort of really keeps you wondering what this whole story is about. It's really wonderful. It's really nice. Very good.
Very true. Yes.
Yes, quite right, Arlene. You have, Karen, some very brief, terse sentences which reinforces the sense of suspense. There are so many things happening here. So many things not being said. You have to read between the lines. Like when they talk about the parents, what happened to the parents, and who is the master? Who is this master? And who is Mr. Robbie? And what is his relationship with Isabel? Who's this Isabel? A lot of well done, Karen. In a brief episode here, there's so many things happening, and that reinforces the sense of the suspense, as I say. So many things happening, and briefly put the first expression. And I like your choice of words like scoff and shrug and scowl. Lovely diction. Your use of diction. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, let's move on now to Leslie Ann Beckles for the next episode.
Hi. My belly churns as I follow Miss Isabel. Fumbling as I stuff the rest of the kurma in my pants pockets, I cough to get her attention. Her smile fades when she sees my face. Joe, something wrong? My head is in a whirl about how much, if anything, I should say about her friendship with Mr. Robbie, when there's a sudden hush. We turn to see Miss Jeanette waltzing down the incline leading from the great house, dressed in a white muslin and twirling a lace parasol. She looks like she's going to a garden party instead of a harvest celebration. Like everyone else, Mr. Robbie's eyes are glued on her, a dazed, doltish look on his face. Miss Isabel's lips tighten as she observes Mr. Robbie's reaction to her sister's appearance. She folds her arms on her sister as her sister approaches. Looks like you took a wrong turn to the polo match, Jeanette. Like many in the crowd, I smother my laughter. The master quirks an eyebrow. So what do we owe the honor? I can't remember the last time you graced us with your presence at a harvest. She flashes her uncle a sharp look, then forces a bright smile. It's such a lovely day, and what with the music drifting up to the house, I felt I just had to come down and join us in all the fun. Well, you've missed most of it. Miss Isabel jams her hands in the pockets of her cotton skirt, the dark boots peeking below her hemline, more suitable for roaming the estate than the dainty white shoes on Miss Jeanette's feet. Miss Jeanette glances towards the near-empty tables, her nose wrinkled. What a pity, she murmurs. Her gaze continues to wander, coming to rest on Mr. Robbie, whom she favors with a brief smile before returning to the master. I was wondering, Uncle, if you could show me this new fermenting shed you've been going on about. Casting her a doubtful look, the master motions her to follow him. Mr. Tom goes after them as they disappear into the shed. Looking in their direction, Miss Isabel hesitates, her brow darkened. With a quick look at Mr. Robbie, who's also staring at the shed, she tosses aside the seed still in her hand and without a word of goodbye, stalks up the hill towards the great house. There are many raised eyebrows and smothered chuckles as the crowd begins to disperse. I stroll over to the tables and offer to help Ma with the clearing up, sneaking glances to where Sunita is likewise helping her mother. After the women leave, empty baskets in hand, I join Mr. Robbie, who supervises a team of men as they take down the trestle tables and dismantle the market. Kermit and I are stacking the poles when Miss Jeanette emerges from the fermenting shed, a cambric handkerchief held to her nose, while the master stalks through the storage shed, impatience written all over his face. What do you think she's doing here? Kermit whispers. I shrug, then watch with unease as she walks towards Mr. Robbie. Watch this puppy show. Kermit snickers, pausing at what he's doing. Miss Jeanette fixes her gaze on Mr. Robbie. Mr. Carter? Aware that all eyes are on them, he shifts his feet. Yes? She holds out her hand. I don't think we've been formally introduced. Mr. Robbie extracts a handkerchief from his pant pocket and wipes his hand before shaking his. Nice to make your acquaintance, Miss Cadet. You seem to be settling into life at Palmyra. Uncle Charles has done nothing but sing your praises, she added, parroting what Miss Isabel said earlier. Mr. Robbie mumbles something as he lowers his head and stuffs the handkerchief into his pocket. Seems there's not much you can't do. When I heard you could even turn your hand to carpentry, it made me think perhaps you could build me a small pavilion in the garden. I've been thinking of entertaining and got a vision of garden parties out of the sun. She twirls her parasol. It would also give me a place to enjoy the garden. I'm not one to go traipsing all over the estate like my sister, but I still like to appreciate our beautiful surroundings. Yes, sure, Mr. Robbie replies, a smile parting his lips. I can draw up some plans and you can tell me which design you prefer. Wouldn't want you missing out on all this natural beauty. Miss Jeanette smiles in return as she runs her hands over her skirts, preening like a grown dog. I look forward to it. Kermit grins as Mr. Robbie's gaze follows Miss Jeanette until she's out of sight. Eh, boy, you look real bazooty. Mr. Tom steps from the fermenting shed. You haven't finished with declaring yet. You haven't finished with declaring up yet, Carter? What you've been doing? The cocoa beans aren't going to bag themselves. Kermit sniggers as Mr. Robbie starts shouting orders to get a move on. But I keep quiet, my belly tightening as if I've eaten a bowl of green mango. Uneasy about all the interest the mistresses are showing in Mr. Robbie. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie Ann. Boy, the story's getting, plot is thickening now. Let's hear some comments.
Yeah. Well, the only thing that comes to my mind is that it flows very naturally, and I think that's very important. Very important. There's no choppiness to it at all. It's nicely done.
Karen, I'm just curious. What year was this set? The story is set because at the beginning I heard Frank reading and I wrote down 1978. So could you what year is this set?
Yeah, the second reading, I guess Krishna missed out saying, said it was Trinidad 1898. So he kind of missed that little bit introduction there.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
And
So
thank you, Harold.
essentially, we've gone back in time, essentially, Karen.
Yes. So the book is bookended by a chapter on either end in the 1978, but most of it is written in 1898.
Okay, so okay. You know, I did that with one of my stories, and the publisher made me switch it back. But I do like that device of starting in the present and going back.
Yeah.
Well, let's continue then. We have Natasha Greer next. Natasha, hello.
Hi, and I'll be reading excerpt 5. Still giddy from being allowed to fire a gun for the first time, I join Mr. Robbie and 3 cocoa piols who sit in a circle around a fire. Paco turns the spit which he has made from a tree branch, to which a skinned tattoo or armadillo is tied. The hunt was successful, the dogs running down 1 tattoo, 2 agouti, and 4 iguanas. The lap evaded us until the last, when one was spotted moving through the bamboo on the far side of the river. The water was too high, and flowed too swiftly to put the dogs to the chase. And though Mr. Robbie took a shot, night was falling fast and he missed in the fading light. The men decided to cook the tattoo in the forest, saving the iguana for the Hindu women to curry and the agouti for Miss Olive to stew. Leaving Paco and his fellow Payols to build a fire and spit, Mr. Robbie set up some target practice, sticking several tree branches in the ground for me to shoot at. He helped me position his 12-gauge shotgun against my shoulder and stood back and instructed me to pull the trigger slowly. Quivering with nerves and excitement, I pulled the trigger too fast, which slammed the stock into my shoulder and sent the gun barrel flying upwards and me flat on my backside. The ringing in my ears muted the men's laughter, and I strained to hear Mr. Robbie's muffled voice again as he again instructed me on how to cradle the heavy gun against my shoulder and press my ear against the stock. Sighting along the barrel, I took 2 deep breaths as instructed, then pulled the trigger. It took 5 shots before I finally winged my first branch. A wide grin split my face as the men cheered. Mesmerized by the fire's flickering flames, the aroma of charred meat wafting from the spit makes me drool. Paco pulls out a hunting knife, carves off a piece of meat, and takes a bite. Delicioso, he declares with a grin. Taking that as their signal, the others reach for their knives and fall upon the roasting meat. Mr. Robbie pulls a jackknife from his pocket and flips open the blade. Here, I reverently take the knife, wondering how old I would have to be before Ma allows me to have my own. After we demolish the small roast to mere bones, the 3 Payols huddle together, prattling in Spanish as they pass around a bottle of rum. Night swiftly descends and bats the size of swifts flash past our heads. The eerie hoot of a nearby jumbie bird is answered by another deep in the forest. Mr. Robbie glances at me as he wipes the grease from the blades with his handkerchief. Had a good time? I nod, a silly grin on my face. He settles onto the ground beside where I squat, staring into the flickering flames that are beginning to die down. You did well with the shooting. Miss Isabel would be proud of you. In truth, he nods. We should invite her next time, just the 3 of us. The words hang between us as we stare into the flames. How sweet is he on Miss Isabel? And if he is, doesn't he realize he's asking for trouble by stirring up things between them? And on top of that, he wants me to get caught in the middle? Perhaps this was the reason for the invitation to go hunting, to butter me up. Mr. Robbie finally breaks the simmering silence. What's the story with the 2 sisters? I reach for a stick and start drawing in the dirt, wondering how far to trust this man. What you mean? He clears his throat. I haven't seen them together much, but when I have, there seems to be a tension between them. And Miss Isabel rarely mentions her sister. I shrug. All I know is that Madame favored Miss Jeanette, who did everything her mother asked, while Miss Isabel was considered a handful, always somewhere on the estate. According to Ma, it was common for Miss Isabel to be dragged kicking and screaming into the house at the end of the day, her clothes covered in mud and dust. She said Miss Isabel created more laundry than the whole household put together. Mr. Robbie laughs, loosening my tongue. Ma said Madame used to try and straighten out Miss Isabel by holding back her dessert. When that didn't work, she tried locking her in her room. But that didn't stop Miss Isabel, who just climbed out the window. She sent Madame into fits of rage, who took it out on everyone in the household, especially poor Mr. Pierre, saying it was he who encouraged their daughter to spend her time gallivanting around the estate. And I want to say thank you very much for allowing us to read your awesome work.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Always very nicely read. And now we're getting a picture of Miss Isabel. So we're getting a clearer picture of who she is. And so that's kind of intriguing.
I like the metaphor, how a smile split her face. I collect nice metaphors like that. I'm going to write that one down.
Thank you.
Samsung just came in. Anybody know who that might be?
No. Well, the next reader is Cynthia. Are you all set, Cynthia? Okay, there we go.
Thank you. Palmyra Excerpts by Karen Barrow. I have excerpt number 7. Miss Jeanette drifts around the house, growing paler and thinner by the day, as if something is sucking the life out of her. Though she is playing the piano again, the music drifting from the drawing room is listless and melancholic. As for Miss Isabel, with the harvest at an end, she reverts to her natural history studies, bringing back hordes of plant specimens for us to dry and catalogue. She also brings back jars filled with all sorts of creepy crawlies, which she captures on the pages of her drawing book, leaving me the dubious honor of releasing them back into the forest. As I walk through the cocoa groves one day, with one of these jars clasped in my hands, I bump into Kermit, who's hauling 2 pails of river water back to his house. We haven't seen each other since that night by the river. Keeping his gaze averted, he nods at the jar. "What you have in there?" I hold up the jar, and he stumbles backward, spilling some of his water. "What the hell is that?" he exclaims, his face twisted in disgust. "Some kind of giant cockroach." I peer at the large insect, its short antennae moving every which way as it crawls up and around the sides of the jar, looking for a means of escape. Its head is tiny compared to its flattened body, and its 6 legs are covered in bristles that look deadlier than the thorns on a bougainvillea bush. "Man, that is the ugliest thing I ever see." Kermit cuts me a look. "What you planning on doing with it?" His eyes take on a gleam. "How you gonna kill it?" I shift from one foot to the next. I'm not going to kill it." Kermit frowns. "Then what you doing with it?" I lower my gaze. "Releasing it back into the forest." "Releasing it?" Kermit looks at me as if I've lost my mind. "What the heck you gonna do that for?" I shrug. "Miss Isabel's orders." Kermit's face twists. "She wants to save that ugly thing?" He stretches. "Man, them white people like to play the stupid we. I never hear such craziness in my life." He gestures toward the jar. "Look at that thing. It don't deserve to live." I raise the jar and grasp the lid as if I'm going to open it. Kermit jumps back 2 paces, upsetting one of the pails of water. I laugh out loud. What you do that for? Kermit demands. You have me masked about the night down by the river. The night all you run and leave me alone with the Lajables. Kermit lowers his gaze. It was every man for himself. He glances back up at me. Looks like you got away just fine. What happened anyway? I lower my voice. When Ollie ran, it was just me and the Lajables. She slowly beckoned me with a bony finger, as if by some invisible force I was pulled toward her until I looked into her fiery red eyes. Then she threw up her hands, and a set of wind began to blow, slow, slow at first, before it picked up speed and began to spiral upwards, whipping she white dress against her legs and sending a pile of leaves from the forest floor into the black, black night. The wind roared. The next thing I know, I too in the air, twisting and turning, fighting for breath. Seeing Kermit's eyes bugging out of his head, I double over with laughter. "Your mother's," Kermit yells, landing a bruising blow on my back. What really happened? I take a moment to catch my breath. You first have to swear you won't tell the others. I hold out my pinky finger, which he grasps with his. I cut the bond with the top of my hand, the implied threat being the loss of the finger. I lean toward him. It was Ma Talbot. Kermit draws a sharp breath. "The Obia woman?" I nod solemnly. "You're sure? You ever see she?" "It was her, I tell you." Kermit cuts me a look. "She say anything?" I nod once again. "That if we ever make a set of noise in the forest again, she gon' put a spell on we." Kermit lowers his gaze to the giant cockroach, then looks at me. He takes a step back. The boys say they haven't seen Winston since that night. We both look down at the creature, trying to crawl out of the jar. Then Kermit lets out a bolt of laughter. "Gotcha!" It's his turn to duck my fist. "You might as well come with me to refill this," he says, picking up the empty pail. "You can release the ugly cockroach in the bush along the way." Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Welcome. I enjoyed reading it.
Thank you.
Cynthia, girl, they make you swear.
That's all right. I speak a lot of languages, you know.
Good girl. Well, Karen, what I really like is the clever weaving in of some of our folklore. It's nicely done.
Thank you.
And Vishnu, I saw you laugh a little bit there.
Well, can you hear me, Heather?
Yeah.
Yeah. A little cockroach story, since we're on cockroaches. There was an apartment I was living in Santa Barbara, California, that was infested with cockroaches. And I was able to get something called a holiday fogger. So I put it in the kitchen, which is where they were, got rid of them. And later that same evening, the neighbor next to me and the neighbor lady downstairs came out when I was on the porch, and they said, "We just got a lot of cockroaches. Where did they all come from?" Of course, I didn't say anything because they'd all traveled from my place,
Now, Althea had a question about the previous reading about the skinning of the animals, and she wanted to know how authentic is that experience? Like, is it something you experienced yourself, or?
No, that's research. My dad was a hunter, and maybe
Yeah.
Jerry, did you ever go hunting with him or?
It's on mute, Jerry.
On mute.
No, I am firmly against hunting in any form or fashion. You know, the way I look at it, for these hunters, if you're feeling hungry, go and get some KFC and leave the damn animals alone.
But it was definitely a way of life there. I mean, back then, you know, I say everyone, you know, even here in Canada, wild meat is still something that is hunted by people. But so it's kind of more those experiences or those stories that I was drawing from, as opposed to no, I've never observed an actual hunt.
If I may make a comment here, Karen, I am very impressed with your attention to detail, you know, and I'll try to see if I could have faulted you on anything. And you remind me of Tom Clancy, who had never been in a submarine, and yet when he wrote The Hunt for the Red October, and the one in the Navy could have faulted him on the slightest detail. I think one's crew was like he had it in the wrong place or something like that. And here it is, you have written a book with so many things you have never done, and you've gotten it correct. Now, if I could just jump ahead to my little part, which is about bursting bamboo. Yes, I said, I think a quarter this time, you know, because like all boys, we used to burst carbide, which you put some carbide in a cling tin with a little hole, you spit in it, you cover it down, and when the acetylene gas comes out, you take a match and pull, you know. And I was always under the impression that I've heard about bursting bamboo, I never did it myself, but I figured it was the same thing. But what you were talking about was something different. It had nothing to do with carbide or anything. So I called up my workman this morning and to get some inside information on what's involved in bursting bamboo, you know, and he gave me the full, spent about 20 minutes going into this thing in detail. And they're really, I hope I'm not taking up time, but there are two ways of doing it. One is you make a hole in it and you fill it with kerosene. You get a length of bamboo, maybe about six notches, and you drill holes in them, you know, a hole through the whole thing, except for the last one. You fill the whole thing with kerosene, and then you light it, you know, and the whole thing explodes. And you, well, you get a big explosion, but what you do, you tie it with cutlass wire so it doesn't blow up in your face. And in fact, Sheba was telling me a story about an incident where a guy and his son were doing this, 10-year-old son, and it did explode. It doused the boy with kerosene, he caught fire, and he died the next day, you know? So it is a serious thing. But he told me that the other way of doing it is simply to put the bamboo in the fire, which is what your method was. So once again, you were spot on, but don't worry, I will find something wrong.
Well, I'll tell you about that bamboo story. I actually had to rewrite it because I did do it and the way you described with the carbide or the kerosene or whatever. But it must have been somewhere in my research. I tried to research as well as I could. And in trying to research the timeline, like would they have been burst in bamboo back then at that time? And I couldn't place that method. And I was so upset because I love that scene. So you're going to be reading it. And I did not want to cut it, but I also didn't want to be historic. Not that anyone would know anyway, I could have just done, but I just like to be a little bit of a perfectionist. But in my research and understand, anyway, I stumbled across the Chinese who, well, created fireworks, but they were also bursting bamboo. And that's how they do it. That's the old historical way, is just taking the cuts. So it's the water in the bamboo that is what causes. So when you heat it up, I believe that's what causes the explosion.
Well, it's something that is done here, especially during Diwali, you know, and the method with the kerosene, you get a bigger bang, but just heating it up, as you described, you get these popping sounds, more like fireworks rather than an explosion, you know.
Yeah. But I wanted it was more historical accuracy. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't.
Sure,
Jerry, you will actually have to try it out now.
Yes.
I am learning the most extraordinary things from listening to this. It's really an education.
No, well, in those days, you could go into any parlor and buy carbide. Carbide is calcium carbide, C2C or something like that. if I remember my chemistry. So you get it as rocks, and if you add water to it, it creates acetylene gas and calcium hydroxide. And the acetylene gas is what you use in oxyacetylene flames. It's a inflammable gas, you know. So the gas would come. So you put it in a tin. You put the carbide in a tin, usually a Milo tin or something, which has a little hole in it, and you spit in it, you know. So that starts the fizz, and you cover it down, and you wait a little while till the gas comes out, and then you put a match. Now I was always afraid to use a match because I would use a flambeau, you know, and the thing would explode. And you could keep doing it once the carbide was in. The carbide was cheap, so it's something we all did when we were growing up. A friend of mine now, he put the flame there and like nothing happened. So he bent down to see what was going on, and it exploded and it blew off his eyebrows. He had to come by my mom, she was a radiographer, but was the closest thing to a nurse in the neighborhood. And she had to pick the carbide out of his eyes.
Jerry's a wonder you still live in.
Jerry is a cat with 24 lives, but based on what he just said, it'd be no surprise to know that he inspired that scene that he's going to be reading, the bamboo bursting scene, because there's a lot of pyrotechnics, and he can give you the chemistry and the knowledge of actually having done it. So it's totally to Jerry that I ascribe that scene.
Yeah, sure.
Well, at least, Jerry, you can say you've been an inspiration.
Well, in some way, I hope, you know, but I'm so proud of my little sister. It's good to know we have at least one intellect in the family, you know.
So Frank, I see you laughing. You ever did any of this?
Yes, you know, before I did medicine, I was a high school teacher in BC and in Saskatchewan. So I was teaching, I just finished university, and I was teaching in a small town high school outside Regina. And the chemistry teacher before me had left in the lab calcium carbide. And I wanted to show the kids an example of an exothermic reaction. And I did the same thing. I got a can and I put the carbide in there and I spit in it. So I asked one of the kids to put this match by the hole. And of course, boom, you know, and the principal, who's about 10 rooms away, heard this big explosion. And oh my God, he kept running down. Luckily, he didn't call 911, and he expected to see me and students laid out on the floor. So I had to reassure him, but he was shaking his head. He didn't know what to make of that.
Well, Frank, you're damn lucky you're in Canada, not the United States.
Sue me.
But I wonder if you can still get carbide to buy, though. I wonder.
Yeah.
What do you think? Every parlor sold it.
What was it used for?
Yeah, why did they sell it?
Well, it was used as in lamps. You know, you put it in a lamp and it will give off the gas, and you lit the lamp. And early lamps, before we had electric lamps, they were lit using carbide. You see, so once the gas is coming out freely, you can light it. But if the gas sort of like collects in a enclosed container and there's just a little hole, it will explode. But the early cars and streetlights and all of those things they used carbide lanterns, you know.
Oh. I thought it was kerosene, but hey.
Kerosene too, yeah.
I guess the carbide the acetylene would give off a white light rather than a yellow light like the kerosene, and you get a brighter light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we used to burst bamboo in the penal yard there of my grandparents, but only at New Year's. So, are you fixing it to that type of year? When we get to the reading, I'm sure we'll know what.
Yeah, I think the reading, it's included in the reading, pretty sure.
Oh, okay. That's great. Okay, well, I guess I'm next with the next excerpt. And this is the young boy going in a horse-drawn wagon with the master. So I will proceed. I sit beside the master who handles the reins of the horse-drawn wagon. It is my first time alone with him, and I find myself tongue-tied. We're on the road for some time before he breaks the silence. Looks like O'Brien is planting some new trees. I glance toward the estate we're passing and see workers planting cocoa tree sapling. I think they lost some of their mature trees to rot, sir, I reply. He shoots me a glance. Where'd you hear that? Some of the boys had to help haul away the diseased trees. O'Brien never mentioned it to me. We'll have to keep an eye on our trees for any signs of spread. Thanks for letting me know. My chest walls swell with pride as the master lapses into silence. I'm tracking the flight of a kingfisher along the river when he speaks again. I hear you're going to retake the college exhibition exams. Yes, sir. Your mother told me you placed fourth on the island. She's very proud of you, as she should be. That was a good result. But not good enough, I mutter. There's a short silence. I suppose not. Another pause. Your mother seems to have high expectations of you. I straighten. I guess she wants the best for me. Yes, your mother is a prideful woman. Something in his tone makes me wonder whether he sees that as a good thing or a bad. I imagine you might prefer to have left school by now, but if you want to get ahead in this world, you'll have to learn it takes a lot of hard work and perseverance. And that goes for all of us. We all have to live up to an ideal created by others. He lapses into a brooding silence. I don't say what's on my mind. That is much easier for some to get ahead than others. You have any idea what you'd like to do? The master asks. I shrug. Ma wants me to be a doctor. And you? I'm thinking of engineering. There's a heavy silence. Did you know that I'm an engineer? Was an engineer? He adds bitterly. I nod. The railroad, right? He grunts. Best 2 years of my life were when I helped plan the railroad. Then my brother Maurice died, and that was that. I had to give it out to run Palmyra. Ironically, my father always said you never appreciate what's given to you half as much as when you work for it yourself. Well, I worked hard to attain my engineering degree and enjoyed my brief career, then was given Palmyra, which has been like a lodestone around my neck ever since. Many a time I asked him to give the estate to Pierre, who was always looking for a handout. But he made me promise on his deathbed I'd never leave Palmyra in Pierre's hands, afraid that between my weak brother and his spendthrift Spanish wife, they'd run the estate into the ground in no time. By the time he finishes his monologue, I'm gripping the edge of my wooden seat, barely able to breathe from the shock that the master, who barely acknowledges my existence, is speaking to me so openly about family matters. The struggle to find my voice and the lack of a ready reply ends in a strangled squeak. But he's not expecting a reply, for he keeps his gaze on the road ahead and flicks the reins to send the horse into a fast trot. Just remember, boy, he continues, even when we think we have freedom to do what we want, we don't really. Circumstances change, and the choices we think we have are taken away. Never forget that. The end. Thank you, Karen, for allowing me to read that.
You're welcome.
I guess this pushes the plot along until we find out what happens to the young boy that has written his exams.
Yeah. It also gives you an introduction to the master. I don't think you'd met him before. So.
Well, I really need to get the book now. I guess you whetted all our appetites to find out the outcomes of all the different strings that go together to produce a story.
And I think that's also highlights one of the themes of the novel, which most of us in this room, all of us, about education, the importance of education in our culture, and about, helping rise, helping people get ahead.
Right, yeah. Well, it was always the dream of the slave that his descendants would do better, his or her descendants would do better than he or she did. So, it goes back to that.
Yeah, I think it's the same of any parent, like it doesn't matter what, your background or whatever, but it's always, I find it interesting when I came here to Canada that a lot of the people our age, in the 60s and early 70s, that most of their parents hadn't had any education, formal education. Most of them were lucky to have finished high school. So it's almost, again, it's almost as if in Canada it's this younger, what you call the baby boomers were kind of the first to realize that education was important and get ahead.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. Although when my father left, Port of Spain to come to behind God's back in Nova Scotia, he came to a small fishing village in Shelburne on the South Shore, and he taught high school. He went back to being a high school teacher, but there, all the young people, they realized that they just become fishermen like their fathers. So they would question, well, why do I have to learn Shakespeare? That was an English teacher. Why do I have to learn Shakespeare? Because I'm just going to end up on the ocean fishing. And why do I need to know this? That was the first time any student ever questioned him, because in Trinidad, the students did not question. They just learned. My experience in the place I'm living now was, where that is. It was not my experience that that older generation really wanted their kids to go to university. That was just my personal experience.
Yeah, it's the same definitely for my husband, because he's from New Brunswick, and there were no expectations that he went to university, and it was by the grace of God he did and stuck with it, because he almost didn't stick with it because there was no expectations. There's no one telling him, no, you have to do this. Whereas all of us here, it's like, if you don't do this, it's the end of your life, right? Your life will...
Right. My parents expected it, so there was no alternative for me.
Yeah.
However, and then that's in my book, Circe's Dance. I talk about that, how that the in-laws of one of the characters has no expectations for the son to go to university, actually kind of talks against it. And so that was a big surprise to me, because this was Canada. This was like a North American country, forward looking. We're taught that Trinidad's just a little hole in the wall, and yet we had bigger ambitions than some of the country people around here. So that was an eye opener for me. So I'm glad you're able to kind of back that up. I wasn't alone in noticing that. Althea, go ahead.
Yes, do I understand that the novel is set mostly in the late 18th century?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm just curious as to what inspired you to write about that time, and it must have been quite challenging, as it would have required you to do a whole lot of research, unless you used like your grandparents, they are our storytellers, and they are a great source, of course, that we can depend on to write about that time. So did you interview a lot of older people, or did it involve more research?
It involved more research. I never knew my grandparents, so they were never going to be a source of. But I have always read historical fiction and nonfiction. It's just always been my genre, and I enjoy research. And so it was just a natural, like, I was never going to write anything else, because I actually enjoy learning. So you learn so much when you write a book, and as you say, and I have to learn about bamboo bursting in China and adapt that to Trinidad, right? The reason I think I chose that time, I didn't want to do slavery. I think that's been covered a lot. I chose the turn of the century, because that's always, there's always a special connotation put on the turn of the century. And I specifically wanted to look at the importance importance of education, like what that passage just, and the rise, like I think in the back of my book, I talk about, the rising of people from the slave or indentured background, rising up through education to then launch a nation that they control, right? So, and in my research, there's actually a lot. Thank God for the internet. I couldn't do this without the internet, because you'd probably have to be in Trinidad and access the library and archives and all that. There's so much on the internet. There's also lots. It was a good time to pick because there is actually a lot of footage. Maybe not quite, but definitely even from like the 1930s, and things didn't change a whole lot back then. But I learned a lot about the education system in Trinidad and how that all came about. Actually, the first high school in Trinidad, I think it was about, the 1930s? It was actually a girls' high school. I think it was in St. Joseph. And it was just a tiny, like it was just in a house of somebody's or whatever. But it was interesting that it was a girls' high school. But what they used to do was send, certainly it was still the French Creoles who were in charge, and then they would send the boys back to France to be educated. So it's not actually surprising that the first school was a girls. So one of the things I learned there was about the whole education system and the awarding, when they started to award. Now you have a mixture of French and English. Actually, at this point, the English are in charge, and awarding scholarships to, it might be like 2 scholarships a year, of course, to young men to go abroad to England and study. And actually, initially, it was just supposed to be whoever, was smart enough to come, get those 2 top positions. And when it started to be consistently people of color, African background, it kind of miffed the Creole population a bit. But, there was scholarships. And so it was literally just the start. It was the first set of young men that were being going abroad to study. And And I'm coming back to where some of the information, definitely Vin Canal. Vin is, I think he's in his late 80s, late early 80s, and also Leo Martin. He was also instrumental because he is someone I knew who owned a cocoa estate. So I got a lot of information about running cocoa estates. And Uncle Leo, he went to England to study. He actually got into Cambridge on one of these scholarships, and he did engineering. So I kind of borrowed a little bit about that So that's why I just kind of put that in there. Because, of course, everybody wants their kids to be a doctor, right? And that's actually my father's background, too. He wanted to do engineering. So it's a laboratory background.
Yeah. I'm just curious because I know that the older generation was quickly disappearing. They are also a good source of, information and research about those times, or maybe their parents have told them stories about what happened. So
I definitely have from 2 older gentlemen. That's
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Karen, you mentioned doing a lot of research, and most of my stories are fact-based, very much as you had mentioned, following your own experience and just fictionalizing it, but keeping the facts straight and so on. But I had one story that I decided to set in Italy, and it was fascinating because of the research I had to do, from what I had heard, to make the story real, about the people in Italy during World War II, and a group of people that became known as Mussolini bastards, that had a very deleterious effect on a various number of people in Italy for generations after that. And it was really interesting to go into kind of a research thing and thinking, oh my God, this is Italy nobody knows about. Very interesting stuff. Dark stuff,
Well, let us move on now. Vishnu is the next reader. And Vishnu, we're all ready for you.
you hear me? No?
Yes, we hear you. Yeah.
So I'm reading number 9, extract number 9. I round the corner of the house and as the kitchen screen door opens, Ma steps out first, but as soon as I see who's behind her, I duck the house. My knees are shaking. Thanks for helping me lay out the body, Eartha, Ma says. Eartha? Ma Talbot? Have a first name? Glad to be of assistance, the old replied in a gravely voice. Family real close me. Not a dramatic death that will have serious repercussions. Shh. Don't say so, Ma urges. You can shh me all you want, but fact is fact. First Mr. Maurice, followed by Mr. Pierre, then the Madame. None of them that easy, that's. Look, I appreciate your help, but you don't need that kind of talk around here. There's a clink of coins, and I glance round the corner to see McCalvert after a payment. In a patched, faded green dress, she doesn't look as terrifying as she did that night by the river. Not like I say anything that is not the truth. And Ruben flashes at the screen door at the back of the veranda, and I'm surprised to see Miss Isabel standing there, looking on as Ma Talbot takes her leave. My delight at seeing her up and above is replaced with a niggling fear that she heard some of all the conversation on the back steps. I sling back into the shadows, overwhelmed by the recent events and past tragedies that have haunted the family. I suddenly yearn childhood innocence, where adult conversations didn't make sense and were easily ignored. Now I sense rising dread, if a vortex is starting to swirl, threatening whoever gets caught in its path. Mrs. Chang, I glanced around the corner as Ma swings around to see Miss Isabel. The way she looks at her, I can tell she is accessing whether Miss Isabel heard any part of the conversation between herself and the older woman. I hold my breath, hoping neither of them sees me. Who is that woman? Miss Isabel asked, staring at this retreating figure of Ma Talbot. Ma averts the gaze. The woman who just left. Miss Isabel nods. That's Eartha Talbot. She lives on the estate along the river. You mean the Obia woman? I wish people wouldn't call her that. She's a midwife, a healer. Miss Isabel stares blankly in the direction in which Ma Talbot is. She is the one who found me in the forest all those years ago. They say she can put curses on people. Masters, that's ignorant. Isabel looks. You think someone asked if I put curse on this family? Eh? The hairs on my arm, right? Words eerily reminiscent of Ma Talbot's. Ma walks toward Isabel, cheering, tears rolling down her face, and embraces her. Hush, my. I look away, unable to recall Ma ever embracing me like that. After weeping quietly on Ma's shoulder for a few minutes, Isabel pulls away and wipes her eye. Thank you for allowing me to read a very short piece.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Vishnu. And of course, Jerry goes, oh, here's Jerry back now. I say, boy, you leave just when it's your turn.
Hello, I just stepped out for a while to let my dog out. Did I miss anything?
Just the end of Vishnu's
Okay.
reading there. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Any comments? Well, you're moving the plot along for us because I mean all your readings are in sequence, Karen. So we're getting is Jerry's next piece toward the end?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm up now?
Yes.
Okay, here goes. All right. The year draws so close, and there's much excitement about this year's celebrations as we say farewell to the old century and welcome a new one. Kermit and I cross paths as we help with the preparations, and one afternoon we find ourselves down by the river, our feet dangling in the water as we take a welcomed break from our chores. He listens in brooding silence as I tell him about the plans for the Old Year's celebrations in Port of Spain, parades, performances by regimental music bands in the bandstand, and a big fireworks displays, almost grander than our simple country celebrations. He nods towards a patch of bamboo on the other side of the river. You know, we can create our own fancy celebrations here too. How so, I ask? You ever hear about bamboo firecrackers? I look at him sideways. No, but you hear about that? Kermit frowns. I think it was Boise who mentioned something about it, or maybe it was Winston. Said they heard about it from some old timer. I shook. You go believe anything either of those two say? Nah, boy, this sounded for real. Our relationship has been so strange lately that I can't tell whether he's joking around. So how come we never heard of this before then? Kermit shifts on his backside and shrugs. Well, we won't know unless we try. After a moment's silence, I say, well, how does it work then? It's real simple. All you do is cut bamboo of different widths and lengths, build a fire, and drop the bamboo in the flames. Does it? I ask. What's supposed to happen? Kermit grins. Well, we make our own set of fireworks. Anyways, we won't know unless we try. I ponder his suggestion, wondering if I'm being set up and afraid I'll spend my free time cutting up lengths of bamboo for no good reason. Okay, I'll go fetch a cutlass and some matches. You build a fire. We spend the next hour cutting bamboo of all sizes, from slender young shoots to older, thicker ones, betting on which will produce the bigger bang. As the fire catches, I concentrate on chopping the bamboo into smaller pieces. In the spirit of inventiveness, we tie the bamboo into bundles of 2, 3, and even 4, wondering how much of a bang we can make with these makeshift firecrackers. I shake a bundle at Kermit. If after all of this it don't work, I'll take this bamboo and bust it over your head. It go work, man, it go work. When the fire is good and ready, we drop a piece of bamboo onto the flames, and lo and behold, there's a small pop. We experiment with ever-increasing sizes and grin at each other as the explosions grow in volume. Jumping about and whooping like madmen, we try the bundles, which explode with a rapid-fire succession of pops and bangs. We're tying together as many 8 bamboo pieces when a raspy voice shouts at us, "What you boys up to?" We swing around to find Ma Talbot standing on the edge of the clearing, her wide-brimmed hat shadowing her face. Kermit's eyes bulge, and he starts to back away. "Stop right where you're at," she commands. Kermit freezes like he's been turned to stone. She turns to me. "You Evangeline's boy, you should know better." I stand there, my mouth opening and closing. Then out of nowhere, I utter a reply. "It's just some harmless fun, Ma Talbot." Kermit looks at me, his mouth hanging open as if expecting me to burn up on the spot. He starts to tremble when she steps towards us. "I go stand here till you put out the fire." She looks at me in the eyes. "And you better not be too long, because it's your mother I going to see up at the house. I guess she knows nothing about what you boys have been up to here." I lower my gaze and shake my head. "Put out the fire, and I go say nothing about it." I glance at Kermit, who's too scared to even blink. I grab the pail and run towards the river. At the sound of crashing in the growth behind me, I looked back, my heart pounding with fear that Mark Talbot had sent an evil spirit after me. I stumbled with relief when Kermit burst through the bush, tears streaming down his face. "You scared me to death," I exclaimed. "How could you leave me alone with that woman?" he demanded, his chest heaving. I bristled. "You the one making like a statue?" "That's exactly what it felt like. And if she worked her obi on me?" "Well, you're here now, ain't?" I replied dryly. Kermit angrily wipes away his tears. "Look, we don't have time to be standing around arguing. We best get that water fast and dout out that fire for sheep." We hurried to the river, filled the pail, and raced back to the clearing. But when we arrived, there's no sign of Ma Talbot or the fire ever having been there. We look around in confusion. Kermit's face is tight with fear. "You sure this is the place?" I take a sniff, and if it wasn't for the trace of smoke in the air, I wouldn't have been too sure myself. "Yeah, this is the place," I reply. And we stand there, looking from each other to the ground, to the surrounding forest. I hear a faint laughter. That's it for me.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Jerry.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
So, Karen, in which way does this remind you of Jerry?
Don't get Jerry talking about his pyrotechnic background. He's already given us a hint of that, so.
Oh boy.
Well, that's kind of that's an exciting. Is that the conclusion or close to?
No, it's close to. So it's New Year's, it's building up to the finale. So because it's a mystery suspense, I have to be careful about which passages so that I didn't give too much of the plot away. So I kind of focused on either theme or character or humor.
But you've given us enough to entice us, so that's good. You've drawn us into a narrative that now we want to continue to unravel. So that's good.
Okay.
I'd like to say too that the cover is very enticing. It's a very well designed cover.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. As soon as I saw the cover, I had gotten some news about I was shortlisted for a literary award the day before, and I won't go into why, but I kind of had mixed feelings about it. But then the next day, I got the cover, and I was like just euphoric. I was just like, oh my gosh, because it totally matches the theme, like how the graphic designer, I think I just gave them a few hints and direction, and as soon as I saw that. And it took me a while, like when you really studied, like there's all the different poems on there, they're all different. Like there's no poem that's repeated. So they must have done their research or something to kind of pick out all these tropical poems.
The paperback bookshop, they were always calling me to ask for more copies of your book, So I went there and I spoke to the person and I said, boy, the books, they're really selling fast, She said, well, yeah, I've been telling everybody about it. I said, what, you like the book? She said, no, I haven't read it, but a lovely cover.
Well, you're lucky about Paper Based having your books in there, because I've tried to get my books in there, but for some reason they're not interested at all. So I've given up.
Well, I dropped some copies of mine and I checked back the next week. It took me about 10 minutes to find them down on near the ground in a shelf on the back, and they sort of explained, well, that was the shelf where they have like, I don't know,
Memoirs.
Whatever class they put my book in, And then I went back another week later, I couldn't find the book at all. So I don't know what to say, But I got some good news. I have been told I got a invoice or whatever it is, that I've made $2.97 from the sale of my book.
Well, Frank and I haven't made a lot of money this year either. We got our big royalty check.
I got my royalty check from Amazon last year, $17.40. And I was thinking now I could pay down on that farm I was looking at.
Well, I know I get about one or two royalty checks a year from Amazon because they have to make at least 100 US before they send you a check. But I'm going around and around and around with Amazon now because I have 3 checks that when you see it on my account on Amazon, that have failed, which means that the TT Post simply never got the checks to me. And so I'm waiting for Amazon to get off their hamster wheel, I call it, because I've heard from about 9 different Amazon people now trying to get these things recut and reposted to me. It's been going on for months. And,
I think with Heather and I, we get royalty checks through the publisher. So I think he takes quite a cut from that too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's just the poor writers, starving artists.
No, well, the good news to me was that because my check was less than $5, I didn't have to pay tax.
you know, Jerry, I mean, as a Trinidad citizen, you don't have to pay tax. If you have to put out a W-8-BEN, which is an IRS form from the US, fill out the W-8-BEN, and you will not have to pay any taxes at all. All Trinidad writers should do that.
Yes, you told me about it. I checked on the website and it was like pages and pages and pages of stuff to fill out.
No. W-8-BEN, 1 page. Very simple. Very simple.
All right. Okay.
You better go and see Harold.
Yeah. Well, maybe you could send it again. Well, I went on the website. Maybe you could send me the correct page.
Yeah, I always keep the page to help writers because it's the simplest thing to fill out. Yeah. And that will keep any books that you sell on Amazon from being taxed by the US. So we get the full amount. And of course, Amazon will send at least 60% royalty per book. Whereas if it's published by a legitimate, so-called legitimate publisher, you'd only get about 5% per book because, of course, the publisher has to take in printing and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera for the book.
Yeah, of course.
Big difference, yeah. But that W-8-BEN move, yes, indeed. It's very,
Well,
very.
maybe you could send me the link, Harold, and I'll investigate it.
Sure. I'll send it in your email, Jerry.
Okay, fine. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, Jerry, is Sheba there? Is she gonna read it all?
No, she's at the airport. My son and his family, they just arrived from England, and she's going to the airport to pick them up.
Oh, okay. Well, the next reading will be the author's reading. So, did you pick something to read for us, Karen? No?
No. I wasn't sure because I didn't know if it was supposed to be one of the 10 that I had picked.
But did you, since we missed reading number 2, do you think it would be relevant to take us back there to
so which, oh no, we didn't, you didn't miss it. It was just that when Vision started it didn't, no, it was Krishna started it, that he didn't just do the top line. So he did the reading, but he just didn't orient you guys to the fact that we had gone back like 80 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want,
you can still read something, Karen.
I'll read the chapter, an excerpt that kind of, it explains, so the reading where Joe has a cockroach in the bottle and he's referring, his Kermit asked him, what happened to you that night? So I'm going to read that excerpt. Again, it's a bunch of, it's Joe's 12th birthday and it's him getting together with a bunch of his pals that he'd grown up with on the estate. My 12th birthday comes at the end of November, which Olive celebrates by baking me a double sponge cake topped with lemon icing, most of which Kermit devours. A few nights later, I sneak out of bed and make my way to the river, where Kermit and a group of boys are gathered around the fire. Winston waves a demijohn of rum in greeting, its wickerwork casing a deep amber in the firelight. "Shiny boy, it's time we make a man out of you." A ripple of laughter spreads through the group as I eye the bottle uneasily, already hearing Ma's voice rising to fever-pitch levels if she catches wind of this. "Come," he says, mushing me over. "Nothing to afraid." I reach for the bottle and take a small sip, barely wetting my lips. I grimace as the liquor burns its way down my throat. Winston stupses. "You call that a taste? Take a real swallow. You're 12 now. You're practically a man." The boys heckle me till I tip back my head and let the alcohol slide down my throat. Peals of laughter fill the surrounding forest as I sputter and gasp, the burning sensation going all the way to my belly. After delivering a couple of stinging stabs to my back, Winston takes back the bottle and proceeds to pass it around. While the second sip goes down slightly better than the first, the third is smoother. "Joe," Winston calls from across the fire, "tell us the latest news from the Great House." I shrug. "Nothing to tell. It's real quiet. Nobody talking to nobody else." "I hear Mr. Robbie tried to find work in Santa Cruz, but no one would take him on," reports one of the boys. I shoot him a look of surprise, then shrug once more. "I know nothing about that. After the master bawled Molly out for talking about Mr. Robbie, no one dares bring up his name." "Papayo!" Winston exclaims. "I guess the master don't like having one pulled over on him." The whole group, other than Boise, erupts in laughter. He frowns. "Molly tell me about getting bawled out by the master." Kermit snickers. "Just 'cause she walking out with you, don't mean she go tell you everything." Another set of laughter drowns out the incessant peeps of insects and frogs. Winston pokes at the fire with a stick, the flames flickering and shape-shifting against an inky backdrop. "I wonder when Master Tom will start looking for another overseer. People not happy with Miss Isabel supervising some of the good gangs." "What it matter if it's a man or woman doing the supervising, I demand, noticing that the rum bottle is lighter as I pass it along. Though it still burns on the way down, my whole body is now filled with the warmth of the fire within. "You know anybody who like taking orders from a woman?" Winston demands. "Ma takes orders from the mistresses," I reply. "It's not the same thing," Winston retorts. "You can't expect hard back working men to take orders from a woman." "Woman does help harvest cocoa too," I counter, my voice rising. "Yeah, but they're not giving the orders, are they?" Winston replies, his chest puffed out. "Well, Miss Isabel is the smartest person I know, smarter than all you put together." Winston stands. "Is that so?" He looks around a group of glassy-eyed boys. "Mr. Smart Aleck here thinks he know more than the rest of us." His attention swings back to me. "It's like you need me to teach you a lesson or what?" I jump up, and though my head's spinning and the ground shifts beneath my feet, it's not enough to keep my mouth from running away on me. If anybody going to be teaching anyone a lesson, it's me. With eyes the size of the donkeys, the boys elbow each other, their gazes shifting between us. "Yo-ho!" Winston exclaims, taking a few steps toward me. "If it's a stick fight you want, there's plenty of wood in the forest to choose from." Kermit jumps in between us. Hey, take it easy now, Winston. You can't see it's the rum talking." I shove Kermit aside. "I can take him. He ain't so big." Winston leaps at me with a roar. With his momentum and larger size, I fall backward and hit the ground hard, but I register no pain as I punch Winston in the ribs. Only when one of his fists connects with my face do I feel a blinding pain in my right eye. Shouts and cheers fill the night, above which Kermit's is the only voice calling for help to get Winston off me. When he's finally pulled away, I roll to one side and scramble to my feet, swaying as the forest spins. Sensing my weakness, Winston struggles free from the hands holding him back, and as if in slow motion, he lunges towards me again. This time he's not so lucky, as I suddenly heave, spewing the contents of my stomach upon us both. Laughter fills the cool night air as Winston runs bawling to the river to clean himself off, while I stumble further downstream and empty the rest of my stomach contents onto the ferns that line the riverbank. "What's the meaning of all this racket?" the voice roars. All laughter dies, and from my one good eye, I see a glowing figure in a white dress, a large walking stick in one hand, and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over her face. Someone screams, "Latcha bless!" and all man scatter like crab, leaving me alone with the apparition. Come here, boy, the figure in white croaks, the voice as dry as a piece of saltfish. I rise from my crouched position, and though I want to follow the boys in their flight, my legs are trembling so badly that I know I'll fall flat on my face if I take a single step. I said, come here, the voice roars. I take one step, then two, only to have my stomach heave again. Nothing comes out. The figure floats toward me and shoves the empty demijohn in my face. Seeing as all you emptied this, I want you to fill it with river water and douse out the fire, you hear me? Though I've only ever seen her once or twice in my life, and even then from a distance, I recognize Mad Talbot, the obeah woman. My hand trembles as I grasp the bottle. And don't let me catch you boys making a subtle noise in my forest again. So also help me God, I go put a curse on all you. She turns and floats away. As she turns and floats away, my bladder muscles weaken and a stream of warm liquid dribbles down my legs.
Thank you, Karen. That's a real coming of age story. The first drink.
Yeah.
Yes, Althea.
Yes, you just mentioned it's a coming of age story, and I was just about to ask who is her audience, if it's a novel for young adults, or is it for young adults and adults, or is it like a fictional autobiography or of a young adult? So yeah, what audience are you catering to?
I'm definitely catering to a mature audience with it being historical fiction. I don't read YA much at all, so it's
Okay.
never been a genre. People did ask why did I pick an 11-year-old boy to be the voice
Yeah.
of the story?
Yeah.
And I think for me it's that coming of age. So he's just on the brink, between childhood and adulthood. And so there's a naiveness and an innocence in his looking at accounts that kind of distances you. Like some of my earlier readers in my writing groups were pushing back, going, "Well, why don't you do it from one of the point of views of one of the sisters, like Isabel or Jeanette?" And there was just something. You guys are all writers, so you know that there's something in you that just tells you, no, this is a way I want it to be. Like it's that naivety and that innocence that and then another question was, well, why a boy and not a girl? And very much this is a fly on the wall kind of story. So Joe is commenting and narrating on events around him. So initially, so the closest thing that everyone would recognize, I didn't even realize it. I did not purposely set out to write it that way, but it was after I'd done it, I was going, okay, how many books, follow this kind of model? And the one everyone will know is The Great Gatsby, because the narrator of The Great Gatsby, it's not Jay Gatsby himself, it's his neighbor. And it's his neighbor who tells the story of Jay Gatsby and what's going on in his life. So that, in a way, that's what Joe is. He's Nick Carraway. He is that fly on the wall. And I had to create, there was some pushback even from my editor, create some story for Joe. Just don't have him. And when I went back and read, I say, you're not going to push against your editor, especially when she, has edited, worked with award-winning authors. But when I went back and looked at The Great Gatsby, there's almost nothing about Nick Carraway. It is all focused on Jay Gatsby. But I thought, okay, so I had to create a narrative and a story for Joe.
Okay. And one more question. How did you choose the title? Because at first I thought it was the name of a girl. And so I'm just curious about the title.
Okay, so the title comes from when I talk about those three Maurice poems on the very first page, and that was the reading. That was the very first reading. And so when I saw the video of Ortinola, there are these three Maurice poems that are now very tall. And when I was looking around to name to name my estate, I guess the palm spoke to me. So it was going to be Palm East, or I settled on Palmyra. I didn't realize until last year when my family would take me down to dim sum in South that there is actually a place
Yeah.
called Palmyra in Central, and I believe
Okay.
it is a cocoa. They do
Okay.
have cocoa estates in Palmyra, but that wasn't. Yeah, so it's definitely influenced by Ortonola's three plants.
Okay. Thank you.
There's also a Palmyra in Spain.
Yeah, well, I think the Palmyra everyone knows is actually the one. Is it Lebanon? It's somewhere in the Middle East there, and it's one of these old historic sites.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what. I'm sure it's in many different places, probably throughout the Caribbean, Spanish names.
You know, it's interesting to bring up how an author, if you choose what age you're writing for. I know I never do. I just simply write to please myself. And it's been interesting for me when I see what people have to say in their reviews on Amazon about my books. And I think most of them are adults who are, reading adult fiction. But in the case of one review for my Mandragora novel, all of the other reviews are really great. They're wonderful reviews, and I'm so pleased. And then this one review came out with 1 star, and the fellow was saying a very poor story, didn't finish the book. And I thought, how very strange. Well, on Amazon, I don't know if you know this, but on Amazon, you can look up who the reviewer is. And it turned out that this fellow only read young adult fiction, and almost all of his reviews were negative. And I thought, well, no wonder he only gave it 1 part, because Mandragora is not for young adults. It's for mature, intelligent readers. No wonder he didn't understand what it was. So you have to kind of know your critics as well, say, okay, where are they coming from?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think that's the thing that's we have to develop a bit of a thick skin, because not everyone's going to like the genre. So it's kind of unusual for them to pick up your genre anyway. And yeah, you're not, there's different audiences. There's male audiences, there's female audiences. One of the things I think I'm most proud about Palmyra is, for some reason, it has appeal to those readers that are out there. It's appeal to both men and women.
Yeah.
Whereas usually, books, men tend to like crime or war or nonfiction, and women kind of like everything else. But
that's very true. Years ago, a very dear friend whom I still correspond with in Seattle, she and I went to see a film at the Cinerama Theater there. It was a battle film about the Napoleonic Wars. It was up for several Oscars that year. Lost all to the Return of the King, the other one. But we were leaving, and I'm going on about what a great movie, this Napoleonic War movie. It was great. And Kay turned to me and she says, yeah. She says, but this is a guy movie. She says, if I hear one more cannon go off, I'm going to scream.
Karen, hi.
yeah.
What I was curious about is it's really a very interesting story. And so, because the boy is 11, he's an 11-year-old boy, right? And in terms of well, first of all, I'm really interested in that scene with the master, and the master is giving this young boy all of this information about the family. And I'm always I'm curious to say, well, why is he doing that? What does he see in this young boy that he is able to sort of reveal this his family situation? And also too, I wonder, as a writer, a young boy of 11 years old, the information that he's giving, is it reliable information, right? Or if you were able to sort of like say, well, some of the other some of the other characters sort of maybe backing up some of that information, or did you feel that the reader would wonder if this young boy, this 11-year-old boy, was reliable in terms of how his point of view of how he was seeing the world and how the observation that he was making in this world?
Okay, yeah, those are good questions. The first one, with the conversation between the master and Joe, I'd just have to say read the book. I'd be giving away information, but that's part of the plot, okay, is their relationship. Another thing I was going to say and had forgotten was a choice between having a boy or a girl. It could have been, either gender, but I felt that even up to certainly when I was growing up, and I still think probably a certain degree today, boys just have a lot more freedom than girls. And I felt that a boy could move around the estate and could get up to whatever mischief he wanted, more so than a girl. So that was my choice of which gender. And in terms of reliable witness, I mean, it's purposely, it's through his eyes. So if I had written it from somebody else's point of view, it could have been quite a different story, right? But so it is his interpretation of how he sees events. He has his own, I don't know if prejudice is the right word, but he certainly has his own likes and dislikes. So we're seeing it purely from his point of view. I'm not trying to make it an adult point of view or a female point of view. I'm trying to do it from the point of view of an 11-year-old boy, and whatever weaknesses or strengths that brings. That was my choice. I just sort of felt that I wanted it to be through a child and have that sort of naivety of exactly what was going on in the world around him, and also that change of
Well, an 11-year-old is very much a cusp age. You're coming out of childhood into adolescence, but you're really neither here nor there at 11. And it can be very difficult. Keep in mind that when Rowling wrote the Harry Potter books, Harry is 11 years old when those books begin. And she must be very aware, I think, as with other authors, that 11, as I say, is a cusp year. So you're growing into knowledge. Still very confused, but you're growing into the knowledge. So it's a nice year to start a story like yours, I think, Yeah.
Thank you.
Karen, one thing I was just wondering is that when the master found out that Robbie was his son,
don't give it away.
I just want, why was he so antagonistic? This is the son of a woman you claim to have loved. Why? I don't know if in answer that question you'll be giving something away, but I found that was kind of strange. If I found out, okay, I'm meeting my son, for the first time in almost 20-something years, I don't think I would say get out of my house,
Well, that's it. That's not why he sends him out of the house. He is reacting the way you would think he should react up until a certain point. But then more information comes to light, and that's when he freaks out. And he's wondering what his if he has any ulterior motives, like why did he come? So no, his first reaction is, this is my,
Okay.
Well, that just makes it more intriguing now.
Yes,
I was hoping to read that part because I found it was fascinating.
Well, I have to whet your appetite, right?
Well, that's a sign of a good storyteller. Well, I guess we're at the end of our allotted time. So thank you very much, Karen, for agreeing to do this and for letting us explore your work and your work ethic as well. And we look forward to reading the entire thing ourselves.
Yeah, no, well, thank you
very much. Get it.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity first with Jerry for recommending it, and then for you guys to embrace it and to agree to highlight Palmyra. Yeah, I mean, as I said, this is all part of trying to get the word out there and realizing not everyone's going to know in the first month or 2 months or even year, and realizing you have to grow your audience, and it's like one step at a time. So that's one thing I'm having to tell myself. The promotion is a whole other thing.
Exactly.
You're
Yeah,
you're a writer. Yeah, you're a writer, and that's where you feel comfortable, and that's your space. And all of a sudden now you have to go push yourself out there. And
you have to be a marketer, a business person. That's right. But and actually, Poetry and Prose gives a forum for authors in the diaspora as well as locally at home to do that.
Yeah, no, I'm very appreciative of that, and that's a nice, in a way, probably COVID probably opened it up to the diaspora, because reading your history was all, of course, in person, which is great. But this is nice to be able to reach a wider audience for sure.
Karen, at the beginning, we mentioned about how you went about writing. My mentor and teacher from many years ago told me something that I've lived by ever since. She said, when you write something, no matter what it is, let it stew in its own juice, whether it's for a night or a week or a month. Let it stew in its own juice. And she says, when you go back, you'll know immediately how you can make it better.
Yeah.
She's absolutely correct in that. And I followed that advice ever since. I can make this, I know how I can do that now. Yeah.
Yeah. It does need time to percolate. And we think the first thing we put out there is so brilliant. And then when you go back, as you say, it's the hardest thing to do, but we're all told that is just let it sit, return to it, go and write something else. It's like, how can I write something else? This is where my whole focus is. And then you come back to it and you go, oh, it's not as perfect as I thought.
What was I thinking when I did that sentence? Oh, yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. We're looking for more from you and from Jerry as well.
Well, and I know about that.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. It was a pleasure, and it was nice to hear my work being read by everyone. I really appreciate.
Okay.
Bye for now. See you next week, in 2 weeks, I guess.
A couple of weeks, Heather. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.